There's something going on with the politics of young men in this country. Like, look at this. This is data from the polling firm Abacus. And what it shows is support for the Conservative Party broken down by age and gender. This is what it looked like just before the federal election 2021. And this is what it looked like just last March. So as you can see, there's been a big increase in support from young men. I'm Jonathan Montpetit. I'm an investigative journalist with CBC News. So I just did this story for The National about why young men are increasingly willing to support the Conservative Party.
Have you ever seen support this high for the Conservatives among young men?
Not in my career. It is a new phenomenon that we are seeing such a divide that the demographic most likely today to say they're going to vote Conservative in our polling are men under the age of 30. That is a complete change to at least what I'm going to say the last few decades of Canadian politics.
The story also looks at different dimensions of the growing gender gap among Gen Z. There's been a lot of talk lately about the global gender gap. Research suggesting that young men are increasingly leaning conservative and young women are increasingly leaning progressive. This is a trend that's been noticed in countries like South Korea, in Germany, and in the US too. So basically this story started with the question of, well, is the same thing happening in Canada? And the short answer is yes. Yes, it is.
Boomers don't actually give a flying fudge about the future generations of Canada.
Why do you think conservatism now is appealing to young men in a way that maybe it hadn't before?
Because we're on the front line of all the crap that's going on. In the 2015 election, I voted for the NDP. It was like 20. And after that election, I started to just kind of see the world through a different lens. And it was mostly just because I realized that life in Canada was getting more difficult. Things were getting more expensive, and no matter how much money the Liberals tried to throw at it, things weren't getting fixed. And I want to own a home. I want to have a family.
And I think the other factor to think about is social media, where you have algorithms directing different content to different audiences. And I think this helps us understand why there's a gender gap between the political attitudes of young men and young women. There's a whole corner of the internet, the manosphere, which is really dedicated to feeding and stoking the resentments that are felt by a lot of young men, helping to propel this backlash politics. I think it matters obviously for the current election. It helps us understand why certain parties may be more appealing to some groups than others. But I also think there's a sociological dimension here that's quite important to consider. So what does it mean for Canadian society that young men and young women have such diametrically opposed views of the world? What is that going to do to the fabric of social life in this country?